This is American Freedom News with Rick Wiles.
Today, our fellow citizens, our way of life, our very freedom came under attack in a series of deliberate and deadly terrorist acts.
There have been untold injuries in this and untold deaths.
There have been thousands of casualties today. 5 floors of the Pentagon have collapsed.
Several area hospitals say they are already booked capacity.
Still thick black smoke billowing from the scene where both towers collapsed.
The target this morning is America, the enemy at this point unknown.
American Freedom News, the radio program on the cutting edge of today's news.
A hijacking that then slammed into the World Trade Center. Both towers of the World Trade Center are gone after being attacked. Still thick black smoke billowing from the scene where both towers collapsed.
This is a special report from American Freedom News. And now, live from his studio in Granbury, Texas, here's the founder and president of American Freedom News, Rick Wiles.
The U.S. government will not deny that it shot down the airliner over Pennsylvania. Brave American citizens fought the hijackers to save the nation's capital. European leaders want to rebuild the World Trade Center and call it the Tower of Europe. And one of the nation's biggest bond traders has been wiped out by the destruction in New York City. Also, 3 cheering Arabs were shipped back to the Middle East, and George Bush is going to Beijing despite the tragedy in the United States of America. I'm Rick Wiles. This is American Freedom News, your alternative newscast, broadcasting news too hot for television. Reuters news service reporting today that federal investigators said today that they cannot rule out the possibility that a United Airlines jetliner that crashed in rural western Pennsylvania had been shot down by the Pentagon. FBI agent Bill Crowley told a news conference today, quote, "We have not ruled out that. We haven't ruled out anything yet." Agent Crowley said it's kind of a loaded question. We're basically at the infancy of this investigation. We haven't certainly come to the conclusion either. Reuters says that the Defense Department on Tuesday vigorously denied reports suggesting that the U.S. military could have downed the hijacked flight in an effort to prevent it from reaching a target in Washington, D.C. Pennsylvania State Police officials said on Thursday debris from the plane had been found up to 8 miles away in a residential community, where local media have quoted residents as speaking of a second aircraft in the area and seeing burning debris falling from the sky. Now, of course, there are also reports about what appears to be heroic efforts by several passengers on that ill-fated flight over Pennsylvania. Reports that passengers attempted to fight and subdue the Arab hijackers. Mark Bingham called his mother Alice from the hijacked United Airlines Flight 93. He told his mom he would try to stop the terrorists. He said, "We're hoping to get these guys." 13 minutes after the call, the aircraft crashed into a field in Pennsylvania, killing everybody on board. Now a lot of people are asking, what exactly happened to Flight 93? Did any of the 38 passengers and 7 crew members on the flight attempt to stop the hijacking? United Flight 93, a Boeing 757 headed for San Francisco, left Newark, New Jersey at 8:01. Followed a normal flight pattern until it reached Cleveland, Ohio, 450 miles west of Newark, when it was diverted and headed back to the East Coast towards Washington. A dispatcher in the area received a telephone call from a passenger on the flight who said that the aircraft had been taken over. The passenger said, "We've been hijacked. We've been hijacked." The dispatcher said that the passenger, who had locked himself in the rear lavatory, described hearing some sort of explosion and seeing white smoke coming from the aircraft. He said, "The plane is going down." Now that description certainly lends credence to the possibility that a missile took down that aircraft. But again, other reports appearing to indicate that several men on that flight wrestled with the hijackers. More gruesome details coming out in some of the news media about what transpired during those horrible moments before the crashes. The pilot of the first craft that hit New York's World Trade Center was told that he was not going to get hurt as Arab hijackers stabbed air stewardess in the rear of the plane as a ploy to lure the captain out of the cockpit. Captain John Ogonowski, age 50, a Vietnam veteran, had the presence of mind to activate a push-to-talk button so that authorities on the ground could listen to the horrific event as they were unfolding on board American Airlines Flight 11. Those transmissions by the former U.S. Air Force officer enabled 2 F-16 fighter jets to be scrambled from Otis Air Force Base, Cape Cod, Massachusetts. By the time that they were airborne, they only had 6 minutes before impact, not enough time to intercept the kamikaze aircraft. One of the hijackers said in a heavily accented voice, "We have more planes. We have other planes." Well, the Christian Science Monitor newspaper reporting that air traffic controllers listened from a concrete bunker in New Hampshire as Captain Ogonowski was told, "Don't do anything foolish. You're not going to get killed." But even as the Arab hijackers were telling the captain that lie, the pilot and his co-pilot, Tom McGinnis, already knew that the flight attendants had been stabbed with knives in the back of the aircraft. Pilots are believed to have been pulled away from the airplane's controls. It is suspected that the pilot and the co-pilot had their throats slit also in order to allow the hijackers to take over the control seats of the 757. The terrorists, who included at least one trained pilot, then flicked off the plane's transponders so its position could not be beamed to the ground. One flight stewardess was able to make a call and reported that several passengers had been stabbed. A businessman used his mobile phone to contact his father in Connecticut. A flight attendant who had been stabbed, he said, before the line went dead. He then called a second time to say the plane is going down. The White House has been reacting, nervously to suggestions that President Bush was hiding in the air rather than returning to the White House to take control of the situation. As you know, on Tuesday, the White House, or I should say Air Force One, zigzagged across the United States, making different landings in various cities before the president finally returned to Washington. The White House seems to be very, very sensitive about suggestions that President Bush was hiding in the air. The White House Press Secretary Ari Fleischer said that the president was kept in the air for his safety because that they had credible, hard evidence that the White House was a target and Air Force One was a target. Now, what I find interesting in this article, this is in today's New York Times. Of course, you and I both know the New York Times is the daily newsletter of the CFR, the New World Order. But what's interesting in the New York Times report is the description by Ari Fleischer of the White House of how the president argued to be taken back to the White House. Now, let me read to you some of these statements. Ari Fleischer said that the president told the staff on Air Force One that he wanted to be returned to the White House immediately and that he was rebuffed. He said then that the president stated his case in even clearer language and was rebuffed again. Now, in the middle of all this stating and rebuffing that was going on, the president was taken to numerous different locations. And according to Ari Fleischer, at 1:25 p.m., Mr. Bush turned to his chief of staff, Andrew Card, as Air Force One sat down on the tarmac of Barksdale Air Force Base and renewed his demand to return to Washington. Mr. Rove quoted the president as saying, quote, the people of America will expect to see me and hear me from Washington. But he said that the president's words were saltier. Now, the New York Times article says, again, Mr. Bush was rebuffed. By then, the Pittsburgh crash was big news on the network, and the television anchors were starting to suggest that Mr. Bush was absent at a time of national crisis. What I find so strange in this explanation by the White House is that the president had to argue to be taken back to the White House. He was rebuffed. Who rebuffs the president? Isn't the president the commander-in-chief? Isn't he the top dog? Doesn't the sign say the buck stops here? Who tells the president of the United States you can't go back? Who argues with the president of the United States? What kind of scene do we have painted here of George W. Bush being shuttled around in Air Force One and being held on Air Force bases, demanding to be taken back to the White House, and some mysterious group of people rebuffing the president, saying, we're not taking you back? I think the White House has done themselves more damage with this explanation by making it appear that George Bush is not in control. Who pulls the strings? Who's telling him what to do? I can't imagine this scene. The President of the United States arguing for hours. Now, mind you, this one, when he was at Barksdale, was 1:25 p.m. The bombing was at East Coast, was like just before 9 a.m. So how many hours had transpired since all this was going on, and the President is still arguing. He's still demanding. He's still stomping his feet, saying, take me back to the White House. Kind of scary, isn't it? I'm Rick Wiles. You're listening to American Freedom News. When I come back, we'll be talking about the hijackers getting their flight training at American flight training schools. Is there any sanity in this country at all? As usual, the enemies of the United States of America got some of their training right here in the United States of America. When will we ever learn? At least one hijacker on each of the 4 planes was trained at a U.S. flight school. Overall, maybe as many as 50 Arab Muslim terrorists may have been involved in the hijackers' well-financed operation. Justice Department spokeswoman Mindy Tucker said, quote, both cash and credit cards were used by the hijackers to purchase tickets, hotel rooms, and other things. The FBI's huge investigation stretches from the Canadian border to Florida, where some of the participants learned how to fly commercial planes before launching the suicide kamikaze attacks. Ms. Tucker said that flight schools in more than one state were involved in training the Muslim hijackers. Multiple cells of terrorist groups participated in the operations, and the hijackers had possible ties to countries that included Saudi Arabia and Egypt. New York Post reporting today, the Saudi and Egyptian madmen who turned hijacked jetliners into winged bombs came from Florida and Canada and may have been training for their murderous mission for more than a year. The New York newspaper says investigators identified many of the 24 hijackers. Some were skilled pilots, and authorities are probing whether the death dealers had cased the targeted flights by posing as business travelers on the routes in the weeks before the disaster. 2 of the hijackers had lodged for a week with Charles Voss, then the bookkeeper for Hoffman Aviation, at the start of their 5 months of training in Florida. Also, 2 other suspects were tracked to the Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University in Daytona Beach, Florida, which offers commercial pilot training. You just have to stop and ask yourself, is anybody at these flight training schools, does it occur to any of them when several Muslims come walking in the door paying cash for flight training, they want to learn to fly jetliners, and they pay cash for the commercial jet training? Did it occur to any of these flight training operators that maybe something was weird, something was fishy, something was suspicious? Did the thought cross any of these flight trainers that maybe I should call the FBI, maybe I should report suspicious activity? Is there any common sense in this country at all? This is the crazy stuff we've been reporting on this program for several years. I'm not surprised by this at all. We have reported on this program about Arab Muslim training bases in London. We've reported that there was a British report about, I think, 6 or 8 months ago, that Osama bin Laden has 3 secret military training bases in the United States. If I recall that report, it was Missouri, Virginia, and I want to say Michigan. About a month ago, I reported that there are militant Muslim training bases in Mexico, just south of the Texas border. We have been warning people for for 3 years now that this is going to happen, that we have Muslim terrorist cells operating in the United States of America. I've openly talked about the major conventions, the meetings taking place in U.S. hotels where 500 to 1,000 Muslims are gathered. They have Hamas terrorists on the platform with hoods on their heads. This isn't the Hotel Hilton in Palestine. We're talking about American hotels with 1,000 Muslims sitting in the attendance, in the audience, with Hamas terrorists with hoods on their heads, speaking at the podium in U.S. hotels, talking about the coming jihad in America, talking about cutting out the intestines of American children, cutting their arms off. I've been telling people about this for 3 years. I am not surprised. I'm not shocked that this has happened. I'm only surprised that it's gone this long before it has happened. When are we going to shut down the borders? When are we going to close the borders? When are we going to use common sense? When are we going to protect the American people from these Muslim terrorists that are coming into Canada, crossing the border, coming into Mexico, into the United States of America? When are we going to clean out their airports of all of these Muslims that are working in the security, in the baggage handling, in the food services, the flight maintenance companies? When are we going to wake up? I'm sorry if it sounds politically incorrect, but I'm going to take care of myself. This is about self-preservation. We better get serious about national security in this country because these people are out to destroy us. The next thing they're going to do, mark my words, the next thing they're going to do is blow up an elementary school. You watch what happens. You're going to watch stretchers carrying mangled bodies of 5 and 6 and 7-year-olds out into the hospitals. You're going to see things unheard of in this country. And then after that, the next step after that is going to be anthrax or smallpox in this country. And instead of 25,000 people dying in one day, it may be 25 million people dying in a week in this country. Then maybe our Congress might say, maybe we should do something about all of the immigrants in this country. Maybe we should check them out. Maybe we ought to do some background checks. What's it going to take to wake up this country? Bob Griswold, the owner and president of Ready Made Resources. What's it going to take, Bob?
Well, I think it's going to take exactly what you mentioned because, it's going to go deeper than that. What's it going to take for the American people to humble themselves and acknowledge that it was God Almighty that gave us our prosperity, that it was God Almighty that gave us our protection? It's obvious the military can't protect us against people like that are determined to kill themselves. Only God can do that. And as a nation, if we do not repent as a nation, if we do not turn back to Him and confess our national sin like Daniel did, we are going to go the way of every other nation that has ever come across the face of the earth. We're going to go down in destruction. These plagues and I think this invasion of people who hate us into our country is nothing more than an invasion, and we have hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of these people in our country who absolutely despise us, despise our way of living. They despise your children. They despise my children. They want to kill them, and they will do whatever it takes to kill them, including flying into buildings with planes. They will use their nuclear weapons. The CIA came out with a report that bin Laden is a nuclear power, that he has acquired some of those backpack nuclear weapons that the Soviet Union conveniently cannot find. He has the biological and chemical weapons. Until America humbles humbles itself before God and implores the Almighty for protection and to confess our sins, we are in precarious waters right now, Rick.
You know, Bob, when we talk like this, the liberals in the news media immediately begin to call us racist and bigots and rednecks, but we're not talking about Arab Americans that are here living peacefully. We're not talking about people that have no violent intention, but reality. It is a fact of life. There is a reality that there are people in this country who are here for one purpose, and that is to destroy what they call the great Satan. That is their purpose. That is their mission. We don't know if they're in the thousands or the hundreds of thousands, and God forbid that there could be 1 million of them who have infiltrated into this country since the 1990 Gulf War. If I were Saddam Hussein, I would have started shipping my soldiers over here one man at a time. I would have been very patient and said, if it takes me 10 years to put 1 million troops inside the United States of America, I'll do it because the Americans...
Well, no other nation on the planet allows the kind of immigration that we allow. These people come in here, their visas run out, we don't kick them out. They get green cards, they run out, they're just here. And again, it has nothing to do with good, innocent people, but we have immigration laws that have been totally ignored for a reason. They flooded into this country. They are here to destroy us. We have, Rick, General Singlab, and he was the U.S. Supreme Commander of all the forces in Korea, told Newsmax that he expects more attacks, and the next ones he expects are biological or chemical. We have William Cohen, former Secretary of Defense, is saying that in a few days, maybe a week or two, that we can expect another attack. This thing is far from being over in a lot of these people's minds. And again, the question poses itself to each and every one of us. What do we do?
Well, that's a question. And what can we do? I know your company, you supply resources, and I know a lot of people get uncomfortable when we talk about preparation, but life has changed in America and in many other countries. And if you lived in Israel or any other country around the world, in London, France, the European countries, bombs go off in those countries all the time. And this is reality in the United States of America now.
It is a war, Rick. It is. There's no two ways to slice it. This is a war. We have been declared war on by a foreign power. They have said that they are going to destroy us, and indiscriminate, totally indiscriminate, whether it was children, women, not pregnant women, just total indiscriminate killing of anybody that gets in their way. And again, there's only one way to fight an enemy like that, and that's with the same brutality. You have to go after them, which I question whether we will have the stomach for doing. I hope we can go after these people. But again, we have these people in our government now saying they expect more attacks. And this isn't to alarm anybody. This isn't to scare anybody. But the thing is if you're prepared and you're prudent, you'll have some sense of security. It's only when you're totally caught, excuse the expression, with your pants down, that you get to that panic. It's like, oh my gosh, I don't have anything. This is happening.
Well, Bob, they're reporting today, that the Afghanistan government, whatever that is, has Osama bin Laden under house arrest. Apparently, they got up this morning and realized the United States military is going to come in and wipe them out, and so they sent some soldiers over to Osama bin Laden's cave and said, you can't leave your cave until we get this worked out. Now, if they extradite Osama bin Laden to the United States of America, and we have a trial that lasts about 30 minutes, and we execute him, of course, if we execute him, we're violating the United Nations laws against capital punishment. But if we go ahead and execute him, and we'll do it here in Texas if they don't have the stomach for it in Washington, D.C., but if we do execute Osama bin Laden, and public demand is going to be for it to be swift, to be fast, Bob, that is going to be, in the eyes of these militant Muslims, that would be equivalent to somebody executing Santa Claus. I mean, it's going to be horrific to them. They're going to go into a rage once we execute their ringleader.
The rage is already there.
But what happens? What happens when we execute Osama bin Laden? Wipe our hands and say, "There, that's over." It's not over. It's going to go to the next level.
This is the problem. We do not need to bring this man to trial. We need to declare war and eradicate him. And the rules of war are different. When we declare war in his power, we need to go over there and eradicate them, and we need to eradicate the support structure that gives them the ability, the finances and the technical and logistic support to carry out operations like that. That is the only response the United States can do at this point, because exactly, if we do that, if we arrest this man and throw him in jail and or whatever we do with him, you know, we're going to have this on our hands for the next 20, 30 years, however long he lives.
Now, what can listeners do right now who are listening to us? What can they do in a practical realm to be cautious, to have some stockpiles of supplies, medical supplies, food supplies? What can they do to get ready?
Well, Rick, I just want to say this. We are here not only to provide goods and services. I've been involved with this for many, many years now. I've been to a lot of learning labs. We learn about these types of chemical and biological things and what people can do to help themselves to prepare, decontamination, detection procedures. You know, a lot of information has come across my desk that has been very helpful to me, for me to learn what to do. And that's also what we like to do at Ready Made Resources, because when people call up and they say, I want to buy a gas mask, but they don't have a clue how to use it. It's like buying a gun you don't know how to use. You need to learn how to use it. We will give some basic instructions, and people, if they call me after hours, I'll sit there and talk with them as long as they need to have questions about how to use it, how to decontaminate. You know, these things that are very important. And we just want to provide these services to people because, again, we believe that the best way for the United States to survive what I believe is inevitable and will be coming is for individual citizens who hear that call of God in their heart, the call of Noah saying, prepare. The best thing is to buy the products that you can afford. If you can't afford them, we'll work with you. You want to make payments. We think it's very important for people to get the stuff in their hands.
Okay, tell us, how can they reach you?
800-627-3809. It's 800-627-3809. We have the gas masks. We have the food supplies in stock, the solar equipment. We have it here, the potassium iodate for the nuclear stuff, the detection equipment for nuclear. We have it here in stock, and we think we offer very good prices on it. So, and again, we'll give instructions on how to use it.
Okay, this is Ready Made Resources. It's a company that I personally recommend. There is a movement towards patriotism. It's alive. Something has been awakened in the last 48 hours in this country. Thank God. People are buying flags. Stores are being sold out of American flags. Military recruiters are reporting that young men are coming into recruiting offices all over the United States of America, signing up for military service. Even the U.S. Congress gathered together outside of the Capitol and saying, God bless America. I'm seeing signs all over here in Texas. American flags are flying from trucks and from rooftops and from porch fronts of homes and offices. We're seeing signs all over the community and throughout Texas saying, God bless America and stand up for America. There is patriotism alive in this country again. Thank God for it. It is now back in style to be patriotic. Where are all of the liberals? Where are the left-wingers? They all have gone underground. You don't see them anywhere right now. They know they better be quiet. They better be quiet right now. It's not a good time to be out here bashing our country and promoting a bunch of left-wing socialistic agenda garbage to the American public. Public is awake right now. The London Telegraph says that the U.S. government was warned 8 years ago that the Pentagon and the White House are vulnerable to attacks from hijacked jets. Military advisor Dr. Marvin Citron says he prepared a 250-page special report for the U.S. intelligence agencies in 1993, but his report was ignored by Washington. He said aircraft could hit the White House or the Pentagon, making a left turn at the Washington Monument and running into the White House, or a right turn running into the Pentagon. He said, quote, they understood and they ignored it. They took it out of the final draft. I think the reason they didn't want that published is because they felt they couldn't do anything about it. It would scare people in the flying public, which it probably would have, and therefore Why worry about it? Other people are raising questions about our intelligence services. Have they failed us? The United States intelligence agencies are under fire over their failure to predict the most devastating attack ever carried out against the American mainland. The intelligence failure is repeatedly being compared to Pearl Harbor. Senator Richard Shelby, Republican member of the Senate Intelligence Committee, said, quote, "This obviously was a failure of great dimension. We had no specific warning of the U.S. being attacked." Taipei Times has a headline today, "The CIA nourished Osama bin Laden." Taipei Times says Saudi dissident Osama bin Laden, chief suspect in the bloody attacks on the U.S., honed his guerrilla skills in the 1980s, commanding Arab fighters funded by the CIA. This article is at our website, AmericanFreedomNews.com. Also, WorldNet Daily has a very fascinating report today written by Paul Sperry. U.S.-equipped terror sponsors. Bill Clinton exported NSA ducking phone, high-tech encryption devices to Syria. I encourage you to read this special report by Paul Sperry, WorldNet Daily. The London Guardian, their report, Osama bin Laden, the former CIA client, obsessed with training pilots. Seems like we have a long history. As close as the CIA has been to Osama bin Laden, you'd think that they would know what he was up to, since they've been on first-name basis for 20-some years. There are also reports today, suggestions, strong recommendations that the Pentagon will have to move the top brass to a more secure location now that it is completely obvious that you can fly an airliner into the Pentagon. The London Telegraph says more than 15,000 Pentagon staff turned up for work today at the Pentagon. One expert on American military affairs believes that life will never be the same again for the headquarters of American Armed Forces. Lauren Thompson, head of the Lexington Institute, said, quote, "The simple fact is that this shows the Pentagon is built in the wrong place, and the National Command military structure will have to be moved somewhere else." Well, with the ban on flying that was implemented by the FAA on Tuesday and was just lifted partially today, you would think that there is no aircraft flying anywhere. Some people say that they have seen some type of aircraft flying over their communities. Now, I've got a listener on the phone right now, Terry from Central Pennsylvania, and he's going to tell us what he saw over his community in Central Pennsylvania yesterday. Terry, welcome to the program.
Hi, Rick. How are you?
I'm doing well. Terry, I believe you live, South Central Pennsylvania?
Just a little bit below the State College area.
Okay, there at Penn State College, Pennsylvania, well acquainted with the area. And tell us what you witnessed. Did this happen on yesterday?
Wednesday, correct.
On Wednesday, okay. Tell us what you saw.
Approximately 2 o'clock, 2:30 in the afternoon, we were leaving a flea market. And I was standing beside my wife. She was in the driver's seat of the van. And we looked out. We saw what appeared to be cobwebs floating through the air, something of that nature. One flew up in front of the van.
Wait a minute. You saw cobwebs floating in the air.
We assumed that's what they were.
Now, when you say floating in the air, are you talking about like you were driving through an old dusty garage and there were cobwebs? Or are you talking about cobwebs up in the sky? What do you mean?
I'm sorry. Right in front of us, above us, around us. Again, we were sitting still. There were strands of cobweb-like material floating through the sky, just kind of floating in the breeze.
Terry, can I ask you to speak more directly into the telephone so that we can pick this up better?
I'm sorry. One of these strands was about 4 feet long. It had a ball of whatever this material was on the end of it. It kind of stopped in front of the van and just hung there in a light little thermal, floated around. And I said, look at that. My wife said, wait a minute, what is that? Reaction, I grabbed it. Asked her to get a piece of paper out. I looked at it for a second. It looked synthetic. It just did not look like cobweb. So we rolled it up, put it in a piece of paper, brought it home. And you know that part of the story.
Well, tell me, how much of this cobweb stuff, how much was floating? What are we talking about? Are you talking about, was it feet, a number of feet long, or was it stretched all the way across the sky? Was it, could you give us a description of how much of the stuff you saw floating in the sky?
Sure, I'm sorry. They were between 4 and 6 feet long, and you could catch them glistening in the sun, and I would say we probably identified a dozen strands of this.
And how high up did it appear that these strands were floating?
30 feet, 40 feet, right in front of us. There was no special, elevation off the ground that they were floating at.
Now, did you see any aircraft flying by at the time?
None. All we saw were the 40,000-foot cloud, which, again, we discussed earlier.
Mm-hmm. Is there anything that you can tell us about those clouds?
Well, I should move on to where we went later. We left the area. We drove up the road approximately 6 miles to another flea market, which is actually an Amish livestock auction. And we were talking to friends of ours, and coming from a northwest going to a southeast direction, we assumed somewhere around 25,000, 30,000 feet. They were flying much lower, were one of these white aircrafts with no markings, or at least nothing that we could identify. Flew over, left a large, some call it chemtrail, some call it contrail, right above us. Now here are people who, for a period of time, I've been trying to explain to them something's taking place in our sky. And they know that I look into my research real hard, and I try to be as factual as possible. Here was my opportunity. So for the next 45 minutes to an hour, we watched this contrail, chemtrail, whatever, spread out into the same form of clouds that were already floating by above. It blended right in. Then we look up, and here comes another one, another jet, and it's coming from a due west to a due east direction. It gets overhead, same thing, large contrail, chemtrail, whatever we want to call it. It starts to spread out. It travels down the valley to where we had come from, about 6-7 miles, which is where the prior chemtrail had floated to. It went through that first chemtrail. As it started to come out the other side, we witnessed something we had never seen before, and that's what startled us. There was, and I'm not sure how to describe it, I'll try my best, there was what appeared to be a straight line. It is as if somebody took a straight line of airspace and turned the lights out in it. It was like a shadow, very straight. Now my friends are looking, I'm saying, look at this. They say, what is this part of it? I said, I don't know. This I've never seen before. The line went into the horizon. As far as the eye could see, that's where this line went. The jet followed it perfectly, just stayed right on this mark, whatever this mark or whatever was. We looked, the line, the shadow, whatever we're going to call it, came back towards us maybe by a mile or two, and then it wasn't there. So I would say 4 miles down the road.
And this happened on Wednesday, and Wednesday, we're talking the day after the bombing in New York. There's not supposed to be any air flights anywhere in the country. Obviously, we would have only military aircraft flying, but you're watching these trails be put down in the sky, and you're witnessing some type of cobweb stuff floating across the sky, just hovering in front of your car.
Correct.
So we have to ask the question: is this connected? Are we talking about is the government spraying something for biological warfare? What is going on? Because this is continuing even in the midst of a great tragedy in the country. They're continuing with this spraying.
Rick, we walked out the door Wednesday morning. I looked up, and the first thing I said was, my, oh my, they were busy last night. This cloud formation that we have watched these airplanes create in the last 3 years, it was everywhere. So, we weren't surprised. I think what we were surprised at was to literally see the planes in daylight with a ban on flying. And then to see this line, this shadow, whatever, stretched out beyond horizon in front of us, that baffled me. I couldn't give answers on that one, but it was great because there were people there who had been looking at various photographs I've taken, over a period of years. They've asked questions, and of course, information is very limited.
And so they were skeptical until they saw this with their own eyes.
They were only 1/4 skeptical, and at this point, you would have needed a spatula to scrape all their jaws off the blacktop.
Yeah. Hey, Terry, we got to run. I appreciate you calling in and giving us details about the strange sighting that you saw. I'm Rick Wiles. You're listening to American Freedom News. I'll be back in a minute with more news that's too hot for television.
The United States will retaliate, and perhaps with a great deal of force.
Terrorism now changing the way that people travel in America.
The White House is also requesting a resolution for us to be able to declare an act of war.
About 8,000 FBI agents and support personnel working on this case throughout the country, trying to gather as much information as they can.
I've directed the full resources of our intelligence and law enforcement communities to find those responsible and to bring them to justice.
Keep your radio tuned to this station. Rick will be back with more global news.
Hello, this is Bob Griswold from Ready Made Resources. We'd like to offer our prayers and condolences to the families that have suffered this tragedy. And in light of the fact that our nation can continue to experience these acts of terrorism in the form of nuclear, chemical, and biological, we'd like to offer you the Israeli gas masks. These masks will filter against all known chemical and biological and nuclear agents. They're $19.95 each. There's a limited supply of them. We'd also like to offer the Big Berkey water filter, which does take out the chemical and biological agents. These are $195. And the last thing we'd like to offer is the potassium iodate. Now, this is going to become in very short supply. In the event that there was a nuclear release of some sort, this potassium iodate helps protect you from the effects of radiation. A bottle that will last a family of 3 for a month is $19.95. You can call us at 800-627-3809. That's 800-627-3809. Or you can visit us at our website at readymaderesources.com. It's readymaderesources.com. And for those of you listening throughout the country, we will be in our office till 10 o'clock Eastern Standard Time to accept phone calls. 800-627-3809. Thank you, and
Mad
God bless.
cow disease, West Nile virus, Lyme disease, hepatitis C. You've heard the reports on American Freedom News about strange viral and bacterial infections entering the United States. Learn about the new discoveries of mild silver protein and call the professionals at MSP Research and Treatment Foundation at 334-493-0420 or go to their website at mildsilverprotein.com. Find out about successful treatments by MDs, dentists, and veterinarians using AG400. Over 5 years of clinical studies finally tell you the truth about what kind of silver actually works. Learn the secrets for survival. Call 334-493-0420. Call today and order mild silver protein. 334-493-0420. That's 334-493-0420. Don't wait. Call now.
You're listening to Rick Wiles, the People's News Reporter.
Shortly after the jetliner plowed into the Pentagon on Tuesday, the U.S. Army quietly locked down Fort Detrick in Frederick, Maryland. 3,804 civilian and military personnel on the 1,100-acre facility were evacuated. They looked up to see drone military helicopters patrolling the airspace around it. I'm talking about drones. We're talking about unmanned aircraft, unmanned military helicopters patrolling the airspace around Frederick, Maryland. Fort Detrick, which conducts research to defend the United States against some of the most deadly biological agents in the world, remained closed yesterday. The Federal Reserve Bank has pumped billions of dollars into the European central banks to prop up the global economy. And one of the nation's top bond dealers, this is a big one, Cantor Fitzgerald, they had over 1,000 employees in the World Trade Center. They can only account for 200 of the 1,000 employees. That means 80% of Cantor Fitzgerald's employee force has been wiped out. Now, this company, Cantor Fitzgerald, accounts for about 25% of the bond business, the bond trading business on Wall Street. The company has been wiped out. Again, I keep reiterating that I don't think the American public has fully absorbed, comprehended the extent of the devastation that was brought to this country on Tuesday by these Muslim fanatics. It is more than we lost 25,000 or more American citizens. It's more that some big buildings fell down. The heart of our financial strength was attacked also. And we're going to see the repercussions in the weeks ahead as major corporations start to discover the extent of the damage done to the economy. Now, some European businessmen want to rebuild the World Trade Centers. In fact, the Italian industry minister, Antonio Marzano, said it wasn't only an attack against the U.S., but against the entire Western world and therefore Europe. He says the buildings should be rebuilt. Well, listen to this. The Europeans want to come to New York City and rebuild the World Trade Center, and they want to call it the Tower of Europe. That article is on our website today, AmericanFreedomNews.com. Also, officials at the IMF and the World Bank have decided they have other things to do other than to meet in Washington, D.C. They're going to cancel their summit meetings. A lot of stuff happening, and we're going to be talking tomorrow on the program about whether our liberties, our freedoms, are going to be taken away from us now. I've got some chilling articles in front of me. Leaders fear slide towards holy war. Colonel Colin Powell sets up global coalition. The dreadful dawning of a new world disorder. These are the headlines. Privacy trade-offs reassessed. It looks like there is going to be a movement to convince the American people that we have to give up many or most of our freedoms and rights in order to be safe and secure. I'm not going to buy that lie. I say it's time the American people take back this country. It's time we stand up and demand common sense in this country.